So then in 2008, the Heenes are chosen to participate in a little show called Wife Swap. Do you remember that show?
I do remember that show.
When the family is introduced in their episode, they're introduced like this. This week, a family of storm chasers, the Heenes from Colorado, Mayumi and Richard, pulled their kids out of school in order to chase tornadoes. They head straight towards a storm with their kids in the car. The wild Heene kids are encouraged to live a life of fun, adventure, and excitement. There's a storm coming, and the Heenes of Colorado are heading straight into it.
Wow, that sounds good. I want to watch it.
Welcome to the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things, a weekly variety podcast that gives you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering.
We explore stories from the darker corners of true crime, the hidden gems of history, and the jaw-dropping deeds of extraordinary people.
I'm Kyle Risi, your ringmaster for this episode.
And I'm Adam Cox, the tent cleaner for this week.
Okay, so just getting so drab.
What would you be this week then?
I would be the fire nipple extinguisher. So when the fire breather, his nipples go on fire, do you know the little tassels at the end of them? Mm-hmm. When they explode, I'm there with an extinguisher to just put out the nipple fire.
Okay, that's very specific. Well, I'm the tent cleaner after all that, because I imagine that would probably be a bloody mess. I'm there hosing down the tent afterwards.
Oh, after the fire?
Yeah, fire.
So technically you work for me. You're under me. So I don't have to do that. I can just be like, hey, just burnt those guys' nipples off.
Clean that up.
Clean up the ashes. Before we dive in, a quick heads up for all you lovely freaks out there. Remember that signing up to our Patreon gets you early access to next week's episode an entire 7 days before anyone else. And it is completely free of charge. If you want even more, you can become a certified freak for a small monthly subscription that will unlock all of our unreleased episodes a whole 6 weeks earlier. This is one of the best ways to support the Compendium as we keep growing.
And while you're at it, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. Your support really does help us reach more people who, just like you, love a good tale of the unexpected.
All right then, freaks, enough of the housekeeping. Let's buckle up and get today's show on the road. Because Adam, today, we are diving into an assembly of inflated tales and deflated dreams.
Well, something about a bouncy castle? Don't know. What are we talking about this week?
The infamous 2009 Bouncy Castle Massacre. Mum will never be the same again.
Yeah, well, sometimes they can be a hazard if you don't properly tie them down, you know.
My neighbours have one. They bring it out every summer.
Yeah, it doesn't flip over the fence though.
No, it doesn't. But it looks awesome. How is it possible that you can buy a commercially readily available bouncy castle for your garden?
Yeah, didn't have that in our day.
No, we didn't. You had to actually have a party. And in order to have a party, you had to be rich.
Yeah, and you'd rent a bouncy castle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You had to rent it. You couldn't just own one. Anyway, Adam.
It's not about bouncy castles then.
Let me set this up for you. In 2009, the world watched as news agencies across the world interrupted regular scheduled programming to cover a horrifying story that was unfolding. A homemade helium balloon was trekking across the skies of Colorado, cruising at an altitude of 7,000 feet. Inside that balloon was a 6-year-old boy who moments before, unbeknownst to his parents, had crawled into it before drifting out of his backyard and into the distance. And so, frantic with worry, the Heene family called the police, who ended up dispatching the Federal Aviation Administration to try and locate and track the balloon in order to save their son. And amidst all of this is when news agencies get wind of the story, and so millions of people start tuning in to watch in horror, collectively hoping that the 6-year-old boy, Falcon Heene, would make it safely back down to the ground. And from there, this story just ends up taking a very unexpected turn that sends the world on a journey from horror to relief, to outrage, and then betrayal. Today, Adam, I'm going to be telling you the story of Balloon Boy.
Balloon Boy.
Have you ever heard of the story before?
Well, I'm just trying to get my head around the fact that a small kid can get into a balloon. So what kind of size balloon is this?
We're talking massive. It's 20 feet in diameter.
Fine.
And it's it looks like a UFO, basically.
Okay, I was thinking like it's not your regular birthday balloon.
No.
I was trying like, how did that happen?
Oh my God. No, it's not. And the thing is, though, this story is just another Baby Jessica story in that through networks like CNN and other 24-hour news networks, the world collectively came together to share in a national tragedy. But of course, unlike Baby Jessica, the story of Balloon Boy has a very different ending. But it is similar in that this is just another example of how media organizations exploit emotions to drive coverage and, in this case, not outright manipulate the facts, but instead gently guide public perception. So much so that this ended up determining how law enforcement ended up investigating the story because they were pressured into serving heads rather than remaining impartial and fair.
Serving heads, as in they needed to bring someone down? I feel like you're being quite cryptic. What went down with this boy in a balloon?
Well, you know, I love a bit of a twist. And there's going to be so many people out there that already know this story, but you've never heard of it. So I'm going to save the twists for later on.
Okay.
Should we dive into it?
Sure.
So, Adam, on October the 15th, 2009, at around 12 p.m., national news stations across the United States interrupted their regular scheduled broadcast with live images of what looked like a literal flying saucer trekking through the skies of Colorado. And what people were seeing was essentially a homemade helium balloon about 20 feet in diameter and about 5 feet tall. And it was making its way directly towards the flight paths of Denver Airport. And it wasn't long before viewers are told that inside that balloon was 6-year-old Falcon Heene.
A homemade balloon.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. 20 feet in diameter as well.
It's pretty damn big and 5 feet tall, so it looks like a flying saucer.
Is that enough helium to lift up a boy? How much did he weigh?
Well, I mean, that actually becomes quite a central part of today's story. But the balloon is basically described as like a Jiffy Pop popcorn tray. Do you know what that is?
No.
So I looked this up for context and I realized that there are exactly 2 times in my life where I've seen this. The first was in Scream 1. So do you remember that opening scene where Drew Barrymore is home alone, she's getting ready to watch a movie, and then the killer calls? In that scene, she's making popcorn on the stove, and that is a Jiffy Pop tray, which is like a foil frying pan that expands as the popcorn kind of starts to pop.
Oh, yeah.
And you see her like putting it on the stove, and then when everything is kicking off, it keeps cutting to the stove, and the popcorn is swelled into this big ball of foil.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's another time that I've also seen this as well, and that was Scary Movie 1.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, where they do a parody of this exact same scene. And when they're cutting to the Jiffy Pop, it's swelled to the point that it's kind of enveloping the kitchen. And then in between that, the killer has like plunged the knife into her breast and he pulls out the implant and he's like super grossed out by it. Adam, it's easily top 5 movie scenes of all time. So I'm glad you've seen it because now you can understand exactly what this looks like.
Okay.
Trekking through kind of the Colorado skies at 7,000 feet.
Yeah, people are thinking, what the hell is a giant popcorn jiffy thing doing in the sky?
Exactly. Except it's way bigger. And it's completely homemade using plastic sheets and rolls of duct tape and wood. And below the balloon is a sort of circular plywood basket attached to the balloon using string and even more duct tape, basically.
Duct tape? How do they make that airtight with duct tape? It feels like something like you'd see on like Blue Peter. You can make this at home.
That's it. This is actually a family project that the Heene family were working on with their kids, right? So basically, on the morning of October the 15th, it was a Thursday. Ordinarily, the kids would be in school, but since it was like an inset day, they had the day off. So they decided to use this day as the first real test launch for what their dad, Richard Heene, called the next big innovation in commuter travel. Basically, no more did you need to sit in traffic. Commuters could just bypass all the cars below, floating their way to work while everyone sat in traffic like absolute chumps.
Is he serious about this?
Probably. We're going to learn a lot more about Richard Heene, and I love him. He cannot do any wrong in my eyes.
I don't know. Sounds like a Fruit Loop.
And honestly, this kind of thing wasn't unusual for the Heene family. They were always inventing stuff. They had been tinkering with this particular prototype for about a month, and today was essentially the big day. The original plan was to kind of test the balloon's buoyancy and rigidity before later fitting it with a mechanism that would help with kind of steering and propulsion. Basically, it was going to use a stun gun. So that morning, the Heenes were preparing for their first round of tests. Richard spent some time filling up the balloon with 5 tanks of helium while the boys fooled around beside him, super excited about all the shit that's happening. And once the balloon was filled, the plan was to kind of tether it to the ground, let it hover around 10 to 15 feet in the air, and then figure out what necessary adjustments were needed to kind of like make it ready for its next stage. On top of that, they were also going to be filming everything, just as they always did whenever they worked on these kind of crazy family projects. Richard's wife, Mayumi, usually handled the editing and would use the footage on their YouTube channel. But today, while they were out in the backyard, their elder son, Bradford, was holding the camcorder while Mayumi set up the stationary camera on the tripod. Eventually, when everything was ready, the Heenes then counted down from 3. Richard then pulled the release and the balloon slowly floated up. It hovered for a second, and then Adam, it was fucking gone. It just kept going. And that's when they realized that Mayumi hadn't tethered it to the ground properly. Here is the moment that balloon starts to float away.
Mayumi, hey, Tyler! Get Mayumi! Come on, man!
That sounds a little chaotic, and he's mad, isn't he?
He's furious. He starts yelling, and in frustration, he dramatically kicks the railing on the wooden launch pad. At that moment, Bradford, the one who's holding the camcorder, spots something, and he screams that Falcon, his youngest brother, is actually on board.
How do they miss that?
Dad, Falcon's in the ship! Dad, Falcon's in there! Where? In the ship! He was just here! No, he's in there! What? He's in there! Don't go in! No, he's not! Yeah! He was just right here! No! Falcon! No, Rick!
They sound distraught.
Yeah, so they had no idea that Falcon had somehow got into this ship.
No. So
How is that even possible?
the thing is, though, they're all just busy, like, just doing what they need to do, right? The kids are running around. They're being kind of like little scallywags. They're jumping in, jumping out. The dad's telling them to stop. He's having a go at them, like, keep out the balloon, whatever. But at that moment, Bradford stops the recording. He rewinds the footage, and to their horror, they see Falcon crawling inside the battery box just before they release the balloon. And now it's drifting off into the distance.
Oh my word.
So, of course, Richard and Mayumi, they start freaking out. Their panic starts to attract their neighbors, who pop their heads up over kind of the fence to kind of see what all the commotion is about. And then at 11:29 a.m., Richard grabs the phone and he dials 911.
Yeah, what do you do in that situation? You're calling the police and you're saying that your kid is trapped in a balloon that's floating away. The police are going to be like, "Sir, are you okay? Put the bottle down."
Exactly. Let's have a listen to the 911 call.
All right. My family and I made an experiment flying saucer. It wasn't supposed to fly.
Okay.
We thought we had this thing tethered down.
Okay.
And I think my 6-year-old boy,
What's wrong?
he got inside and it took off. Yeah.
Okay, where is he at?
He's in the air.
He's in the air?
Yeah. He's only 6. Can anybody rescue him?
Okay. When's the last time you saw him?
Just 15, 20 minutes ago.
What do you think?
Yeah, he sounds completely distraught, I guess.
What did you think of the operator's questions at the end? Like, so when was the last time you saw him? Like, really casually. Like, my son is in the air.
Yeah, I saw him on the ground. He's now not on the ground.
So, of course, the cops, they race over to the house. Richard and Mayumi, they explain what's happened. And by now, even more neighbors have gathered. They're trying to figure out what's going on. The police decide that they need to be, of course, sure that Falcon is on that balloon. So they search the whole house, right? They check the basement, the garage, everywhere. But Falcon is nowhere to be found.
And do they show the police the footage of Falcon crawling into the balloon? Yeah. Okay, but I guess they have to make sure that, I don't know, he didn't crawl out again or something like that.
So eventually what they do is they send some teams around to kind of search the nearby woods and the water reservoir. Officers start knocking on neighbors' doors, hoping that maybe he was hiding in their gardens. But very soon they realize, Adam, that wherever that balloon was, Falcon was on it.
Is anyone keeping tabs on where the balloon is going?
They have no idea where it is now. They've lost sight of it. They
Really?
cannot see it. So by this time, word spreads to the media, who dispatch reporters to the Heene's house. Any news crews that aren't assigned to the neighborhood are essentially sent up in helicopters, hoping to kind of try and track down the balloon. But like I said, at first, no one can find it. There is a time where people literally think that it's already come down somewhere. But then, all of a sudden, someone over Adams County, miles away, looks out the window and they see the silvery blob trekking through the sky at 7,000 feet in the air. They immediately call the police, who confirm it is the balloon, and they calculate that it is making a beeline for the direct flight paths over Denver International Airport.
That's not good.
So the FFA, they alert the airport, who immediately order all northbound flights to be rerouted to avoid, obviously, a collision. The National Guard are dispatched, who send out their own helicopters to track the balloon. And just to be safe, they dispatch paramedics to follow on the ground just in case, of course, the worst happens.
Jeez.
While all of this is unfolding, more and more people, not just in the USA now, but all over the world are now tuning in, and they're all glued to their screens watching to see how the story unfolds. Because earlier that year, the Pixar movie Up was released, so people were like dubbing this the real life Up.
Oh, really?
Isn't that crazy? And so the broadcasts are just filled with these really intense shots of them filming the balloon from inside the helicopters, and it's just blitzing through the air. And the cameras that are filming on the ground, they have to like really zoom in because, of course, this balloon is like 7,000 feet up in the air, right? And so at that zoom depth, the camera stabilization is really bad if you've ever tried to film something by zooming in. So it looks like the balloon is like really blitzing at really high speeds. Reporters start estimating that it's traveling at like 500 miles per hour.
As fast as an airplane.
Exactly. In reality, it's going like 20 miles an hour max. So it's kind of like on a par with like the O.J. Simpson Bronco chase, where everyone in the 90s remembers like that was a high-speed chase. They were going 120 miles an hour. In reality, they were literally trailing them at 25 miles an hour.
So what are they thinking then? What's the protocol when this happens?
I don't think there is one, really. What can you do? You can't really approach it with a helicopter.
No, because you'll slice the balloon. The only thing I can think of is like somehow trap it in a giant net. So you have two helicopters, get this, and in between them is a net, and they kind of fly over the balloon and they capture and they kind of cover it, and they're able to kind of drag it back to safety.
And I guess maybe that might be viable if they had time.
Do they not have this as a backup?
No, not ready to go.
Just get a fishing net.
Another balloon scenario. Get the net out, boys.
Yeah, just go to the like nearest fishing port, whatever, get a net, job done.
So this footage is also interspersed with just interviews of neighbors on their driveways. And so it's during these kind of segues from the action that more and more information starts coming out about the Heene family. And neighbors are basically saying this was an accident that was just waiting to happen, considering all the weird shit that the family were into. They talk about how they're really into psychics and extraterrestrials, and they're always doing these weird science experiments, including kind of driving head first into a fucking tornado.
Why?
They're really into storm chasing. It's just really bizarre.
Right into one?
Yeah.
Like the eye of the storm?
The eye of the storm, yeah.
Okay. Now, as you know, they sound a little bit careless and reckless.
Exactly. So it's then around about 1:30 p.m. that they notice that the balloon is starting to lose altitude. The only explanation for this is, of course, that it's kind of sprung a leak somewhere, which at first sounds like a good thing. But even at 20 miles an hour, crashing at that speed with a 6-year-old on board might not be great.
There's gravity.
Exactly. And there's also a chance that it could crash into like an electricity pylon or a building, which means that Falcon could drop hard from there, right? Either way, they know that a crash is inevitable. So the news channels, they start to plan in a delay in the broadcast just so that if the worst happens, they can just quickly cut the footage. So the balloon starts to kind of descend lower and lower. It's going 20 miles an hour, almost horizontally. It's slowly drifting down. Everyone is braced in that moment. Richard and Mayumi are beside themselves with worry and anticipation, hoping that Falcon will be safe. And then, to everyone's relief, around about 60 miles from where the balloon initially took off, the balloon sort of horizontally skips across the ground into a freshly ploughed field.
So it gently lands. Wow.
But horizontally traveling at 20 miles an hour.
I see, just coming down quite fast.
Like a very gradual diagonal. And it kind of just skips.
Well, that's pretty lucky.
Very lucky. But when it touches down, the rescue workers, they rush in to grab it. Still incredibly light on the ground, right? So what they do is they throw over a bunch of ropes to keep it from drifting away, and immediately they start stabbing the balloon, kind of just to deflate it. One of the rescuers is frantically calling Falcon's name, hoping, praying for kind of some kind of response, but they don't hear anything.
What?
I've got some information that I'm not quite sure how to say it, but I don't believe that they found anybody with this balloon. There's no basket, and they're not pulling anybody out of it at this point.
Falcon's not in the balloon. What this means is that at some point, he has fallen 7,000 feet to his death.
Shit.
So a Weld County Sheriff deputy, a guy named Jared Webb, said that when he first saw the balloon flying over Platteville, he saw an object falling out of the balloon. But because this call came in moments after the first person reported the balloon, it was just presumed this was just another person calling in to say they've sighted the balloon. It's kind of like sort of when you're out in town and you see someone collapse in the street, so you call the ambulance and they tell you, yeah, thanks, we've already received the call, right? But they don't ask if you have any other information that might be useful. that doesn't happen here. And so in that instant, as the reports start circulating that Falcon isn't in the balloon, this entire saga morphs into basically a recovery operation. Can you imagine what their family must be going through, thinking about the last moments that their son must have gone through?
Yeah, so it sounds like there was something he crawled into, and so he's just fallen out of that.
From what they've said in the report, the whole basket is fallen out, not he's jumped out. There is this crazy footage. Someone captures an image of something like literally dropping. There's a big dot like 100 feet below, and that's the moment where the balloon is kind of fallen apart.
Shit.
So rescuers start sending out people to retrace the path of the balloon. They send people out on horseback, helicopters, they do a U-turn. They ask people to kind of check nearby fields. And in the end, they search for 3 hours and they don't find anything. At 4:14 p.m., the media are desperate for any kind of update. And so the county sheriff steps in front of a press conference and he says, obviously, this is now a recovery operation. He explains what actions the different departments were doing at that time. The media are, of course, listening intently. And people at home, Adam, they're just devastated. They've been watching this unfold for hours. So there's this huge sense of sympathy for what Richard and Mayumi must be going through. It's just awful. While all of that is going on, there's a commotion that starts to kind of unfurl behind the sheriff. They pull the sheriff aside, and while he is talking to his team, everyone is like, shit, have they found a fucking body? The sheriff then turns back to the reporters and he says, we have found Falcon.
Oh no, they're the worst, right?
And he's fucking alive!
Alive? How? What? Hang on. So he managed to survive that fall?
Let's listen to the clip.
He's located, he's alive, he's at the house. So all of the reports that we had earlier, fortunately, misinformation.
Where was he?
I don't know.
He's alive, he's at the house.
We just got the page from somebody on the scene that he's at the house and he's been located.
Confirmed.
So he was at the house the whole time?
I'm going to tell you now what the title of this episode is.
Okay.
I'm calling it The Balloon Boy Hoax, the viral media circus that spiraled out of control.
Oh, so this was all staged?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the insinuation is.
But how... So hang on, I thought the police did like a proper search of the property. The parents would have surely searched everything, the neighborhood, and they all agreed he's in the balloon. Are you telling me that he's just been hiding in his bed the whole time or something?
So apparently, while Richard and Mayumi were sitting on their sofa waiting for news to come in that they've found Falcon, Falcon just walks into the living room. He's like, what's up, motherfucker?
I doubt he said that.
Essentially, that's what he did. He just walked in and he's like, what's everyone doing?
I bet they would like just like fret with worry and they're like, oh, hi, Falcon. What?
Yeah, so like he wasn't in the balloon. He didn't get in there. He might have got in there, but he certainly got out.
Okay, so I'm really confused. I can't work out if he generally did get out and everyone just started overreacting and panicking. Well, not overreacting, reacting in a rational way, I guess. Or if there's something up, because the only thing is, whilst the dad did sound a little bit obviously distraught on the phone, there's just something about it that I couldn't help but think.
Like he was acting.
Yeah.
Like he is a very animated kind of guy, right? And he just, everything is just like, wow. It's like the guy who lives next door with his kids. And he's like a super, super attentive dad. And just everything is amazing. His kids are like, look, Dad and Aunt. And he's like, wow, what should we call him? It was that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but also, I don't know, maybe, but I don't know if it's because I've watched too many crime documentaries and listening to like people calling in who end up being the murderer.
Yeah.
There's just something about it that I couldn't put my finger on. So what is it? Did they plan this, or was this an accident and actually Falcon was just hiding and they didn't know?
Well, that is the biggest thing. Was this a hoax or was this not a hoax? And that is what the story is about. So, apparently, Falcon had fallen asleep in the garage attic. They ask him why he even went into the attic, and he says that he was upset because his dad had yelled at him after climbing inside the balloon, so he just storms off in a huff. Here's his explanation of it all.
I'm in the attic, and he's scared me because he yelled at me. That's why I went in the attic. I heard Charlie. I didn't want to come out really soon, or else he would yell at me. I thought I'd get in trouble.
I yelled at him for going inside it. It's potentially dangerous if you get inside and the electricity comes on.
Okay. That sounds rational that a kid would hide if they've just been told off. So, okay.
So what's going on here? Later, at a press conference, the family, of course, they're super relieved. Richard addresses the press. He's all emotional, saying that after the balloon took off, after obviously failing to tether it down properly, Bradford, the eldest son, said that he saw him getting into the balloon. They check the videotape, and sure enough, it shows Falcon getting in, but obviously at some point, he gets out again. Right?
Yeah.
So after this story kind of starts wrapping up, there is this huge sense of joy that Falcon wasn't harmed. He's just kind of like a little scallywag who's kind of fallen asleep and caused a bit of bother. So the media start talking to other members of the public who amplify their shared feeling of relief. But it's through these interviews that whispers begin to emerge that maybe this was some sort of publicity stunt, maybe even a hoax. Of course, the family completely dismiss this, right? Saying that's a horrible insinuation considering everything that we've just been through. And they just remind everyone that all of this was based on what Bradford saw and that throughout all of this, his testimony had been consistent. They even saw Falcon getting into the balloon on the video camera.
Yeah, that's true. But I can understand them still thinking that had they done a thorough search of the house. And I just feel like the police would have done that, right?
But he was in the garage, in the attic of the garage. So maybe it was just not somewhere where they thought to look.
I guess, yeah.
But the thing is, though, people just won't let this drop, right? So to calm the public down, the county sheriff, he gives a statement saying that he doesn't think that this was a hoax. When they were on site, the family's emotions genuinely seemed real. They even searched the whole house. They scoured the neighborhood. They didn't find anything. So in those circumstances, your mind jumps to the next most logical possibility. And to them, there was no reason to believe that this was a stunt.
Yeah, I guess they've got to take the allegation or what's happened, the evidence that they have so far seriously. So
and
I
they
get
have
that.
to react to that, especially because there's a time element now, right? So later that night, the Heenes are invited onto Larry King via video link. And this has been hosted by Wolf Blitzer. They want to kind of talk about the entire ordeal and the relief of finding out that Falcon was in the garage the entire time. Here is a clip from that segment.
Say hi to Wolf. This is Wolf.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
Who the hell is this?
We believe 100% that he was on board.
And Falcon was really in the garage this whole time. I don't know if Falcon can hear me, but was he, because I know at some point he fell asleep in that garage, but he was hiding out because he thought you were going to punish him for something that happened earlier in the day. Did he hear anything? Did he hear you screaming out, Falcon, Falcon?
He's asking Falcon, did you hear us calling your name at any time? You did?
You did?
Well, why didn't you come out?
You guys said that we did this for a show.
Yeah.
They did this for a show.
Uh-huh.
Oh. So Falcon's just slipped up.
Yeah, and did you not hear what Richard said just at the very end of that clip?
No, what did he say then?
He went, man.
Oh, no. Oh, Falcon. What? Like, rule number one. You never talk about Fight Club.
Never talk about Fight Club. So I think this is a perfect time to take a quick break. And when we get back, I'm going to tell you a bit more about the Heenes. And we're going to find out what Falcon actually meant when he said that they were doing this all for a show.
Okay.
Thanks to VA, I have a place to call home with the VA Home Loan, an education with a GI Bill, the highest quality, most affordable healthcare, and the financial support I need to manage the disabilities that I have from my service. Get what you earned. Visit choose.va.gov.
Not all veterans are eligible for the type or amount of benefits mentioned here.
So Adam, we're back. What are you thinking? Little scallywag?
Scallywag, or was the whole family scallywags? But I guess your opening dialogue or monologue or whatever it was about there being betrayal at the end of this and revenge or something like that.
Got your little spider senses going, right?
Yeah, I guess something was perhaps just, maybe I didn't fully buy it and maybe that's why I was a bit suspect of the guy.
Right.
And now we've got the son, Falcon, actually saying, Dad, you told me to do this. And so what was their plan? It sounded like they like to invent stuff. So were they just wanting attention for one of their crazy inventions?
Their motives are all going to become clear when we find out a bit more about the Heene family. But I also want you to remember and be critical when you're thinking about whether or not something is circumstantial evidence and actually is definitive proof that they would do this, or it's something that maybe the media and the police just try and kind of like make fit.
Okay.
So Richard and Mayumi, they met in the late 1990s at a film institute in Hollywood where they were both in their early 30s. They were both trying to make it in the entertainment industry, so probably flag number one.
Yeah.
When they met, they hit it off almost immediately, so pretty much by the end of that year, they were married. Richard was, of course, a struggling actor at the time. He was a comedian as well, And Mayumi from Japan had just moved to the United States.
So you said that he was a struggling actor.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably why I wasn't convinced about his phone call. Everything was just a little bit too much. If I was a director, I'd be like, just bring it down a notch.
But that could also be his personality because he is an actor. When you also get to understand the type of actor that he is, to me, it makes perfect sense because he likes all this he is basically a child entertainer at heart. That is what he is. That's the kind of acting he does.
The drama.
Exactly. So at the time, they are living in Burbank, which is like the go-to place if you want to make it in the entertainment industry. No matter what they do, though, neither of them manage to land a break. So over time, they start struggling and they fall deeper and deeper into debt. They do have this small video production company making kind of video reels for other actors, which Mayumi kind of sort of carries. Meanwhile, Richard is focusing on trying to land them their own show, pitching various ideas to production companies. One idea that he comes up with is the Science Detective. So it's science spelled as if you would spell psychic with a P-S-Y-I-E-N-C-E, like Science Detective, because it encapsulates not just science, but also mysteries and aliens and psychics and the Mayan calendar and things like that. That's the premise of the show.
And no network picked up on this show?
No network picked up on
I
the show.
am shocked.
What? I think it's a great idea.
Well, you and here would be very happy.
So basically, they investigate various kind of scientific mysteries like UFOs, electromagnetism, and other things like that. But nobody is, of course, interested, so they just keep getting rejected. It's around about this time that Mayumi, she falls pregnant with their elder son, Bradford. Then comes Rio, and then a couple of years after that comes the little scallywag, Falcon.
I like all of those names.
They are great names, aren't they?
Yeah.
In my opinion, after researching the Heenes, Richard he's just the most incredible dad. Like, he is every kid's fantasy. He reminds me of Phil Dunphy from Modern Family.
Okay, yeah.
And he even looks like him a bit as well in his younger years before he gets his floppy hair. He's just a giant kid, essentially. And it's in this environment that the boys grow up. They're always doing cool things. Like I said, Richard is super into sciencey stuff. And it's not without merit. At one point, he co-writes a paper on electromagnetic fields, which ends up getting published in like the National Weather Digest. So he's in that sphere, right? He might still be a whack job, but he's writing papers.
Yeah, it sounds harmless. It sounds fun still.
He's also really obsessed with weather and storms. So whenever it's storm or tornado season, Richard takes the kids to Mayumi and they go essentially intercepting dust devils in the desert.
With the kids in the car?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they literally are driving into tornadoes.
That doesn't sound safe.
It's not safe. Basically, his mission is to prove his theory that rotating storms create their own magnetic fields. They do all of this storm chasing in their little red minivan, which has got all their equipment in it. The van is really, really shaggy. It's got no back glass. It's probably got kind of shattered during a storm. It's completely covered in dents from like crashing into shit and probably hailstones. Parts of it are literally duct taped together.
Do you know what actually he reminds me of?
Yes, I know what you're going to say.
What am I going to say?
The guy from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm seeing. A little bit irresponsible, but generally a good dad.
Exactly. But Richard is also an inventor, right? He makes all sorts of gadgets. One of the things that he makes is this robotic kind of lift device for loading stuff into trucks. He calls it the Heene Duty Truck Transformer. And honestly, it looks pretty useful, but it is $14,000. So it's a little bit out of people's budgets. And with Mayumi's help, they record literally everything. Mayumi will upload it to their YouTube channel. And remember, this is at a time, 2009, when YouTube is still relatively new. So they're kind of like leveraging this new piece of technology that's now available to the masses to try and elevate their brand, essentially. One of the videos that you can still find on YouTube is an instructional video that Richard calls Box Time, where he basically teaches the kids carpentry through the art of song and dance to promote creativity and individualism.
Sounds like it should be something on like Sesame Street.
That's what I mean by he is like a children's presenter. He's got that air about him. And like I said, even though he's been rejected by a bunch of different production companies, Richard still co-hosts his web show called Science Detectives. And basically they cover all sorts of theories, including the theory behind the Mayan calendar and how the world was going to end in the year 2012. It's really out there stuff. But the point is, it's super cool growing up as a kid in the Heene household. And as you quite rightly said, as fun as all this sounds, he has very little regard for safety, especially when it comes to his boys. At one point, they're out storm chasing and Richard drives the family into the eye of Hurricane Gustav just so that they can capture the footage on film and then send it to CNN. So he directly puts his kids in harm's way. It gets to the point where his co-host doesn't want to be responsible for something bad happening to his boys, so he ends up quitting. And I just get the sense that Richard is just a bit of a handful. I don't care, though, because I love him.
What does his wife say about this?
She's just along for the ride. She's also in that kind of industry as well. She's definitely more reserved than he is.
So he goes to her one day, I'm just taking the kids out to drive into a tornado. That's great, honey. I'll see you at 6.
Yes, but with a Japanese accent.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
The sad reality is that as eccentric as Richard and the Heenes are, and as much as he tries to get his shows off the ground, it never happens for them. And so they just continue to struggle financially. Eventually, they do give up on their dream of making it in entertainment. And so in 2007, they moved to Fort Collins, Colorado, where Mayumi, she continues making the video reels for actors, and she takes care of homeschooling the kids. Richard finds work as a handyman, doing all sorts of odd jobs. One of those things includes picking up dog shit.
Okay.
So there is a really cute video of them on YouTube challenging his kids to see who can collect the most dog shit. One of them gets some shit on his finger and he freaks out. So he even makes something as awful as that situation where he's resorting to having to pick up dog poop into this really wholesome family moment.
I can appreciate the sentiment, but your kid's helping you pick up dog poo. I mean, there's just not enough anti-bac.
That used to be my job growing up.
Picking up dog poo?
I used to have to pick up the dog poo in the backyard.
Didn't you poo in the backyard?
I do not want to talk about that on this. I had to do what I had to do. So then in 2008, the Heenes are chosen to participate in a little show called Wife Swap. Do you remember that show?
I do remember that show.
Basically, for those who do not know, the premise of the show is simple. They take two families with completely different lifestyles. They swap out the mums for 2 weeks. It's always a major culture shock for the families because they deliberately pair them with families that are just completely the opposite. The Heenes get paired with the Martell family from Connecticut, who run like a child-proofing business. Unlike the Heenes, they are really orderly. They're really respectful. Everything in the home is in its place. And when you say it's bedtime, the kids go to bed. But for the Heene boys, that just means it's time to jump off the roof.
Well, it sounds like they've got a business all about safety. And then they put this poor mother in the house with this family and just, oh my God.
Kids, keep quiet. Here, play with this stun gun. Eventually, this episode airs in October 2008. And when the family is introduced in their episode, they're introduced like this. This week, a family of storm chasers, the Heenes from Colorado, Mayumi and Richard pulled their kids out of school in order to chase tornadoes. They head straight towards a storm with their kids in the car. Then Richard rides a motorbike into the center of the tornado, taking readings for research. The wild Heene kids are encouraged to live a life of fun, adventure, and excitement. There's a storm coming, and the Heenes of Colorado are heading straight into it.
Wow, that sounds good. I want to watch it.
Of course, when Karen Martell arrives, she can't control the kids. They're just unbelievably wild. They misbehave. They won't listen to anything she says. And on top of that, Richard doesn't do anything
I imagine
to assist.
They are like, what's the guy, the boy from like the Wild Thornberrys?
Yes, Donnie.
Donnie. I imagine just 3 Donnies, like just acting like monkeys around the house.
Exactly. On top of this, though, Richard is super obnoxious, though. Like, he's really vulgar and sexist towards Karen. And at one point, he says to her, once a woman hits 25, it's downhill from there. Now, I know that sounds awful. I don't know if he's acting, if he's just leaning into it for ratings. I don't know. It's really difficult to tell. Naturally, of course, this blows up. There's a massive fight. There's tears. Karen wants to go home. It's all just a whole rigmarole. Basically, this episode gets voted the most memorable of the entire franchise. And so the Heenes are invited back for the 100th episode, which airs in March 2009. This time, they're matched with the Silver family from Florida. The dad's like a landscaper, and the mum is a psychic who believes that she can communicate with the dead. And again, Richard is an actor, so he kind of leans into what made them so popular on the first show. And again, there's just loads of shouting, loads of arguing, and it's just immensely popular. And because of that, Richard thinks that this is going to be the springboard to him landing his own show.
Oh God, not the science show again.
Yes, so again, he repitches Science Detectives, but it's the same old answer. Nobody's interested. Feels so bad for him. He just wants it so bad.
So is this all... He's not doing all this just to get his own show still, is he?
The point that I'm trying to make by telling you all of this is that when Falcon tells Wolf Blitzer on Larry King Live that he thought that they were doing this for the show, people now can't help speculating whether or not the Balloon Boy incident was nothing more than another publicity stunt to get Richard back into the news so he can secure his own show.
Ah, I see.
And so based on this, the media sense that there is a story there, an expose, if you will, and they start looking into the Heenes with more scrutiny. And that's when they discover that as fun and eccentric as Richard seems to be, he's actually a bit of a dirtbag.
Well, so far he just seems irresponsible, a bit fame hungry, but not necessarily a bad person. So what do you mean by a dirtbag?
So basically they find out that he's got all these charges against him for vandalism, vehicle tampering, and disturbing the peace. They also discover that he was once convicted for assault with a deadly weapon.
Okay.
Don't know what the deadly weapon is. That's my point that I'm making here, is that we don't know the circumstances behind some of these charges. Here's a perfect example. They also find out that he's been arrested on domestic violence charges, though he's never convicted. Apparently what happened was that the police showed up to the Heene's house after they received a 911 hang-up call. So just to be safe, they check it out. Mayumi answers the door with a broken blood vessel under her eye. She says that she was having trouble putting her contact lens in. And so in the end, there's no arrests that are made. They just think that probably the kids called 911 as a joke and then just hung up real quick. Mm-hmm. But the police have to record this, right? So It's on record. But of course, the media, when they look into Richard, that doesn't matter. It was something that they could spin into something more salacious. And so when this goes public, loads of people start saying, see, this proves that he had motive for pulling this off.
Yeah, it sounds like he has a lot, but how much of it was just him just being a nuisance?
Exactly.
Rather than actually being a violent person.
And this is so detrimental to the truth because the media have their own agenda at play. As the story picks up steam, the media and the public, they start pointing fingers at the police, accusing them of being stupid and naive for believing the Heenes. Basically, they're outraged that millions in taxpayer money was wasted sending out rescue teams, paramedics, the National Guard, the FFA, on this essentially wild goose chase. Also, Richard Heene could elevate his profile.
Really? Was millions spent just on that?
$2 million in one estimate for what the FFA had to do in terms of their costs.
It sounded like it was only for a few hours, like an afternoon. But equally, if the police had gone, no, we don't believe you, Mr. Heene, and then something did go bad, then obviously, well, what does that look like?
So under the public and media pressure, investigators call in a professor from Colorado State University to see if it was even possible that the balloon was even capable of carrying Falcon in the first place. And basically, they say, yes, 100%. This was possible. The next day, the Heenes go into full defense mode. They go onto the Today Show, and Richard explains that when Falcon first reappeared, the news crew that was there interviewed him and asked Falcon to tell the camera where he was hiding this whole time. He says, of course, that he was asleep in the attic. And so they ask him if he can recreate climbing into the attic for the camera. And he's like, yeah, sure. And then later, as the news crews are wrapping up at the house, Falcon asks the news reporter what they were going to use that footage for. And the news reporter tells Falcon that they were going to use it for the show.
Okay, for the news, yeah.
For the news, exactly. So when Falcon repeats that later on Larry King Live, that is what he is referring to.
Yeah, he did that in order for the show, the recreation of that.
So it seems like a reasonable explanation, right? But the crazy thing is that during that segment on the Today Show, Falcon is really sick. He's vomiting up on live television. Everyone is more focused on him rather than listening to Richard's explanation. So it ends up getting overshadowed.
Is he sick with guilt?
I mean, when you watch the footage, as soon as they ask that question, Falcon goes, I feel sick. So, and it does sound suspicious. But I don't know if it's been doctored like that.
Yeah, but then the dad's like, oh, man, but why does he say that? Does he do that because he thinks, oh, this is going to be interpreted wrongly? Or
possibly.
Or did he actually go, oh, bollocks, if the game's up?
If that was the case, he would have retreated, right? He's desperately trying to salvage.
Yeah.
It's really tricky to know. But get this. After that segment on the Today Show, they then go on to Good Morning America. Again, Richard is asked to clarify. When they ask a question, Falcon is sick again. In the end, Mayumi takes Falcon aside to kind of sort him out, and Richard just continues with the interview. But the whole time, while he's answering that question, you can hear Falcon puking up. In fact, you even see him vomiting. Oh, so he is actually sick.
Is it, or is it just some tin soup?
No, he is sick. By this point, Richard is now really irritated, right? He says, I'm starting to get ticked off because I'm repeatedly getting asked this. Why would I gain from this? I'm not trying to sell anything. I'm not advertising anything. My family and I are always doing crazy shit like this, like scientific research or building something together. And again, him losing it doesn't help his case. Like, people have already made up their mind. So when they see him being all defensive, they're like, see, that's exactly what a guilty person would do.
And he's like, no, I don't. Hashtag science.
Follow and subscribe.
Yeah.
So again, under public pressure, the police open an investigation. They discover that when Falcon first drifted off, instead of first calling 911, Richard called Channel 9 first.
Okay. So that doesn't sound right, though.
It doesn't, but also wasn't true.
Oh, okay.
It is true that he didn't call 911 first. He actually called the FAA first, the Federal Aviation Administration, to see if they could kind of try and find the balloon using radar or a helicopter. He then called 911. And then a little while later, he then called Channel 9 because he also knew that they had access to helicopters and they might be able to try and locate the balloon.
Okay. There's logic with all of that.
Oh, 100%. But again, just like with so many of these stories that we've covered in the past, like with Madeleine McCann, Lindy Chamberlain, Amanda Knox, as soon as that misinformation hits the airways, it becomes the common wisdom and it's almost impossible to then put that genie back in the bottle.
I don't know if I would have that knowledge to call the news. I don't know, but I guess he might have been connected and...
He's a TV guy, right?
Yeah, so maybe, but you'd think like the police or whoever would start bringing in, or the aviation people would bring in the right people that are going to have the right equipment. So it just does
I guess he's thinking the more people on it, the better.
Yeah, it does seem a bit calculated, but that's only on reflection when you start piecing all these jigsaw pieces together. At the time, I wouldn't have thought anything of it.
So it's not looking good, right? They've got this piece of misinformation that's out there. That makes it out into the media. And so to keep the press and the public happy, the sheriff's office feel like they're obligated to find some kind of reason to press charges. Because they're being told that they're stupid and they're naive for trying to believe them. And they even come out and had a statement saying that we believe them 100%. We were there. We saw the emotion. We searched the house. Fine. We have no reason to disbelieve them. Mm-hmm. But they look dumb. And so now they're forced to try and build a case against them, which is not the right way of doing things. They carry out their own investigation on the balloon to see if it was even capable of carrying Falcon off. Remember, they aren't experts in this. That's why they reached out to that professor at the university in the first place. So it's clear that this time it's not about finding objective evidence, right? They're trying to make the things fit to suit their own purposes. Mm-hmm. And I'll explain why the balloon being capable of carrying Falcon isn't evidence at all anyway in just a second. But basically, they calculate that the balloon was actually heavier than they initially thought. And so it's deemed impossible for it to lift off with Falcon in it. And so they act like this is some sort of smoking gun that proves that Richard was trying to pull off this hoax. But here's why that's bullshit. How was Richard to know that? Especially considering the urgency of what was happening at that time, right? Like, oh my God, Richard, Falcon is in that balloon. Wait, Mayumi, wait. Let me just do some calculations to work out if that is possible. No, you don't ask questions. You respond with what you think you are seeing. Mm. So this is just so dumb, but it gives the sheriff's office what they need to file charges because they're buckling under this public pressure that's driven by the media.
Yeah, and I'm still... Do the police believe this then? Do they actually believe it, or they're just trying to fit a square peg in a round hole?
They initially believed. They did. And I think now, again, just because of the pressure from the media, no one likes to be told they look stupid.
Yeah.
And I think now they're recanting. Another piece of tenuous evidence that they use as proof that this was a hoax comes from someone who worked with Richard on Richard's Science Detective Show. They take a bunch of documents to various publications, eventually Gawker buys them, and the documents are basically a brainstorming session with about 50 ideas that are written on them, including concepts for ghost hunting, storm chasing, various experiments with magnets, and all sorts of other things. One of those ideas is attracting UFOs with a homemade flying saucer, and the notes say that the plan was to modify a weather balloon to look like a real UFO, then utilize the media as a way to make its presence known to the masses, and then the media would fall into a frenzy over this, and the hope was that this would turn into kind of the most significant UFO sighting since Roswell.
Yeah, but how many times has this happened? Like a weather balloon gets mistaken for a UFO. That happens all the time.
It's dumb. Again, they report on this as if it's the smoking gun in this case, and it just really isn't. Like, it's not the same thing. Yes, the only thing that's in common there is the mention of the media and the mention of the balloon. Mm. There's no mention of making a child sit in the balloon and send him off. None of that. I really do sound like I'm defending Richard, but the reality is that I feel like this is a witch hunt driven by the media and public opinion. It doesn't actually matter that he's actually guilty. They have decided that he is, and it's based on what they're trying to convince us is evidence. Right? They're using all these things to say, see, this is evidence. It's not evidence. It doesn't prove anything. And they're relying on the fact that people out there just cannot think critically.
Okay, so you're saying they're grasping at straws a little bit just to prove their case,
Exactly.
regardless or not. But then if he is guilty, does that matter? That they're still trying to bring some kind of retribution or resolvement on this?
If this really were a hoax, I get why the public would be outraged. And the press knows this. So making him look guilty helps them sell more papers. So they needed to make all of this stuff fit, right? Because they know that they can capitalize on the fear and the outrage and the feeling of betrayal. This guy who sells these documents with all the brainstorming stuff on it, he says that after Wife Swap, Richard became like just a publicity monster, saying that Richard honestly believed that the world was going to end in 2012 according to the Mayan calendar. And so his mission was to make as much money as possible to ensure that his family would survive through that. He also says that Richard told him that he was going to use his celebrity platform to expose the shape-shifting reptiles that were running kind of the shadow government. Basically, it's a whole lot of kind of David Icke conspiracy shit going on here.
I'm pretty sure there was a Marvel show about that.
Yeah, pretty much. So all of this builds what the media say is credible evidence for the hoax theory, which, again, doesn't make Richard look very good in any way.
No, but then I just can't work out if he's just a bit crazy or he was trying to pull a hoax. He's obviously tried to get fame and get himself and his family out there. It's just, there are some jigsaw pieces here that do fit the theory that he would do this as a hoax.
And you're right. There is some evidence that could lead to it, but the press are out for blood. It doesn't matter if he's guilty or not. I think they want him to be guilty.
Probably.
So Richard is asked to take a lie detector test.
Well, that's not like proof at all, but okay.
I mean, in a lot of these cases, it can't be used as evidence, can it? But the investigators disguise this as concern for him and his family, saying that this is the only way that you can get the press off your back. So he agrees. During the test, he has a diabetic episode. And I'm not sure if this is genuine or not, but in the end, they don't get anything from him.
Okay.
They then question Mayumi. She does a lie detector test. She fails.
Okay.
When confronted, she then folds and she tells them how they were struggling to pitch their own reality TV show and how they were struggling financially. She then tells them that they knew all along that Falcon wasn't in the balloon.
What?
Apparently, the kids were all in on it too, being told to pretend that Falcon had gotten into the balloon, and they say that this has all been in the works for the last 2 weeks. They've been planning it. And Richard even instructed the kids to lie to the media and to the police. And again, Mayumi says that the motive was to make the family more marketable for future media interest.
So the press were right.
It's not the point.
Yeah, but hang on. I'd still think whether they were grasping at straws or putting 1 and 5 together to get whatever number, there was something up and they were doing this all for a show. So does it matter? I don't know. I'm torn.
I can see why you're torn, but I'm going to explain why this is still problematic. Because it's not led with objective investigation. They've made up their mind, they try to make it fit, and they just got lucky. That's my point that I'm trying to make.
Did they? I don't know. I feel like there was enough evidence there, or at least enough suspicious, like you say, circumstantial maybe, enough in there to weed out the truth.
Do you want to hear the moment that the police provide a statement?
Yes.
As I said, it has been determined that this is a hoax, that it was a publicity stunt. We believe that we have evidence at this point to indicate that it was a publicity stunt done with the hopes of marketing themselves or better market themselves for a reality television show at some point in the future. After the fact, we have since learned, as many of you have, that these people are actors. Not only have they appeared in several reality television shows and on YouTubes, we have since determined that, in fact, they met together. The way that they met and established their relationship was in acting school in Hollywood. So needless to say, they put on a very good show for us, and we bought it.
I like how he referred to it as YouTubes.
Yeah, no. That's right, it is plural.
So, yeah.
So he's saying that his acting was so good. I'm sorry, did you listen to that police tape?
So naturally, the cops, they now have something, right? So they search the Heene house, they seize their family's computer or their video equipment, they find a document titled Ways to Get Funding, and then one photo of a flying saucer.
So they came up with one idea and went, yep, we'll stick with that.
The next morning, on Sunday, the 18th of October, the sheriff holds a press conference to provide an update on the investigation. The sheriff, of course, now looks really bad for initially defending the family. So he says, "This was our plan all along, to gain the family's trust, but secretly we knew that they were full of shit.
Oh, God.
We are sorry for misleading the media, but this is how we investigate cases." Essentially, that's the gist of what he said.
I mean, it makes them no better than the bloody family in terms of don't try and backtrack now.
Exactly. And this is what is worrying. What we are seeing here is a complex interplay between the media, public perception, and the police's need to stick to due process, not allowing public outrage and sensationalist kind of journalism to dictate their actions. And that's what they've done here. This is why this is problematic.
Yes. Okay. Now you may have a point.
Like, I get it. They were guilty. But because of the pressure, the police buckled and sort of set out to prove that they were guilty. They just happened to strike it lucky. And I honestly believe that if they hadn't have struck it lucky, there is no way of knowing how far they might have gone to prove otherwise. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, to save face.
And we've seen this so many times before. They'd already decided to bring in their own guy to assess whether or not the balloon could carry Falcon. And I bet you they forced the outcome that they needed. And whether guilty or not, the way authorities handled the case sets a dangerous precedent, one where the need to appease the media overshadowed a thorough, measured approach. So once again, this is another episode that serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of reacting to public spectacle rather than focusing on solid investigative work. So have I convinced you now?
Like a little bit, maybe. I mean, yes, I agree. If they just follow actual protocol and actually done their job properly, then they might have got to this outcome without going, oh, actually, this was part of the master plan.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. Don't lie. You were tricked.
Yeah.
So I do agree with all that. But ultimately, it seems like the end result was the right result in terms of bringing some justice.
Correct.
What happened to the family? Did they ever get their TV show behind bars?
So with this confession, the sheriff obviously submits recommendations for charges to be filed against the Heenes for conspiracy, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, false reporting, attempting to influence a public official. The Aviation Administration also submits recommendations for a fine of $11,000 for launching an unauthorized aircraft. Plus, they recommend that the family pay back the rescue costs of $2 million for the rescue effort.
How are they going to do that? They need a TV show for that.
These are only recommendations.
Recommendations. We can't pay. Okay.
So this is looking really bad. And this is how Richard responds. He says that English isn't Mayumi's first language. And so when she was being questioned, she didn't understand what the officers meant when they asked her, was this a hoax? Richard claims that Mayumi actually thought that the word hoax meant exhibition, which she still maintains that it was because of obviously everything that happened afterwards. So he concludes that this was all just a witch hunt and the sheriff was trying to make a name for himself and was using the publicity from the Balloon Boy incident to promote his own name. So what do you think of that?
So he's now saying that the police was doing this very same thing that he was trying to do in terms of getting publicity?
Okay, the point I'm trying to make is that she is being coerced, or she didn't understand what she was agreeing to. She said that she thought that the word hoax meant exhibition, which it was. But I did look up the word hoax and exhibition, and in Japanese, they are two very separate concepts. So it's highly unlikely that those two terms could be mixed up.
Yeah, I feel, again, that's some backpedaling from the family.
Exactly. But he vows that he's going to do whatever it takes to clear his name. But there's a problem with that, because Mayumi isn't a US citizen yet. So it means that now that she has a felony charge against her, she's going to be deported back to Japan. So the only way to spare her is for Richard to accept a deal where he pleads guilty and they promise to leave Mayumi alone. He also says that because of how massive this story has gotten, if he was to go to trial, there was almost no chance of him getting a fair trial where a jury's opinions weren't swayed by the media. So it would be a trial where he was guilty before he was even proven innocent.
So what's he getting at? What does he settle with then?
He takes a deal, basically. And eventually Mayumi and Richard are handed their sentences. Richard gets 90 days in prison. Mayumi, she gets 20 days in weekend jail to be served after Richard's release.
Weekend jail?
It's so random, basically.
That's a thing?
Yeah. She has to report to prison on a Friday, serve the weekend behind bars, and then go home on the Monday.
So just 10 weekends?
Pretty much, yeah.
What are you up to this weekend? Going to prison?
Like Joanne has just got a cellmate for the weekend. She's got a friend staying over.
A friend's, yeah. Got a sleepover.
They both get 100 hours of community service, and of course, they are asked to pay back $36,000 in restitution, so not $2 million. But they must also write a formal apology to the various agencies that were involved in helping search for Connor Falcon. Plus, they're also banned from profiting from anything related to Balloon Boy for the next 4 years, which I think is fair. But when their sentences are served, they're obviously humiliated. So Richard asks for his balloon back and...
Balloon back. So they kept it, they held it hostage this whole time. It's like, can I have that back, please?
And he even makes sure to measure it just in case he swapped it out for another one. It means a lot to him.
It's like, are you going to do another stunt? Is he going to hope to put this in like a museum or something?
He thinks that this is his ticket.
Oh, God.
He's going to wait for the 4 years and then he's going to do something with it. And then, of course, he leaves Colorado and they move to Florida, right, with their tail between their legs. And Richard, he's still at it. He is still a Phil Dunphy. When he's not working as a contractor, he is inventing stuff. His latest invention is the Richard Heene bear scratch, which basically is a stick of bark that you mount on your wall and you use it to scratch your back like a bear. And it's brilliant. And it can be yours for just $19.99.
Hi, I'm inventor Richard Heene. If you itch like a son of a twitch, then you need my latest invention, the patent-pending bear scratch. Check it out. You never walk out in the woods and see a bear bring off a branch to scratch his back. No, he uses the entire tree.
If you itch like a son of a twitch.
I need to see what this looks like.
What, the bear scratch?
It's just a pole.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to itch your back?
Yeah, it's kind of like textured like a bark.
It looks like a bit like a didgeridoo. That is something else.
Yep.
Oh, there's the family. Oh, all the kids are grown up. All those lying kids.
So, yeah, 4 years after the order that prevented them from profiting from the Balloon Boy stories, Richard forms a band with his kids and he calls it the Heene Boys. And it's a heavy metal band.
Right.
They all have super long hair now, like down to their asses, all three of them, including Richard. And one of the first songs that they release is titled Balloon Boy No Hoax. And I love it.
Is it a good song?
It's not, but I just love it. It's because you've got these really young kids with really long hair, like wife beaters on, and they've got their guitars, and they are headbanging, they're swinging their hair around. It's just brilliant. And the song is titled Balloon Boy No Hoax.
Right. And so they're still, how many years on, still trying to profit from this?
I think they just haven't made it yet, right? So it's
Are they ever going to make it?
Probably not, right? Probably not.
I mean, they've probably made it as much as they ever can make it with this story.
Even though they are found guilty, it still feels like the truth is still a bit of a grey area, right? Like, was this really a hoax or just a set of unfortunate circumstances?
Yeah, it was a hoax. I'm pretty sure we're clear on that.
I've got to ask these questions, Adam. We've got to be poignant. So in October 2019, for the 10th anniversary since all of this happened, a journalist named Robert Sanchez contacts the Heenes saying that he wants to finally give them a chance to tell their side of the story. They invite Robert to stay with them for a whole week. He gets to know the family inside and out. Robert becomes infatuated with them, right? They're so wild, they're so unconventional, but they're totally endearing. He just is in love with them. He walks away after that week, believing without a doubt that they were telling the truth. Richard and Mayumi, they say that he can have access to all of their archive files surrounding the case to help him write his story. He just has to contact their lawyer and they will give him access to the files. So when he gets down to going through them, he finds several handwritten notes in Mayumi's handwriting, in part of a journal. And in them, he finds a detailed timeline of the events leading up to the balloon launch. The first note is dated April the 27th, 2009. It's about Richard's science detective show and how it's been rejected yet again. It's like the fifth rejection in like 5 months. And it talks about how the family's kind of financial situation was getting even worse. The next note is dated the 6th of October, 2009. So 9 days before the launch. Mayumi writes that they had a video of Falcon saying that he wanted to get inside the experimental balloon that the family had built. Then on the 14th of October, Mayumi writes that Richard asks her if she had ever heard of Lawn Chair Larry. And Mayumi is like, no, what the fuck is that? Do you know the story?
No.
Richard tells her that Lawn Chair Larry was this American truck driver who in 1982 had lived with his lifetime obsession with flying. But because he had bad eyesight, he's disqualified from becoming a pilot. So he spends the next 20 years dreaming of flying, and so one day he says, I'm going to make this happen. He attaches 45 helium balloons to a lawn chair and lets himself lift off. He ascends to 16,000 feet in the air and he spends the next 14 hours flying over San Pedro. And the plan was to use a pellet gun to shoot out some of the balloons when he was ready to come down. He drops the fucking pellet gun. It's okay though. He manages to shoot a couple, but it does mean that it takes hours and hours and hours for him to finally come down. Eventually, the chair lands, it gets tangled in power lines, it causes a huge blackout, and when he is rescued, he is arrested. But Adam, the point is, he's a fucking legend. So he goes and does all these TV shows. He quits his job, he becomes a motivational speaker, but after this, he really struggles to maintain a stable career. This is not the part that Rich is focusing on, right? He's focusing on the legend aspect before all of this settles down. Because eventually, Lawn Chair Larry takes a hike into a national forest and he shoots himself. So it's a real sad ending, but he is focusing on the legend part of this.
Yeah, I feel like that's a little bit short-sighted.
It is. The point that Rich is trying to make is that he wants to do something similar so that he can become a legend. And in Mayumi's notes, the section ends with her writing that Falcon can hide in the basement.
Interesting.
So Mayumi has admitted that the intention here was to pull off a hoax. But on the day of the launch, she writes that the deliberate hoax then turned into real panic when they couldn't find Falcon, who was supposed to be hiding in the basement. But instead, he had climbed into the attic. So she talks about how there was genuine fear that he had floated away.
Okay.
New dynamic.
So we were planning a hoax, but then the hoax went wrong.
And then we thought it was a real hoax.
But then it was a hoax. And then we're actually really happy about it. But actually, so she's got written evidence of this.
She wrote this all in a journal and stupidly forgot about it. And then let the journalist have access to all the files, forgetting that was in there.
And what did the journalist do? Did he quiz them? Did they have a diabetic attack or start throwing up? Because that seems to be what they do to get out of it.
So after stumbling upon this revelation, Robert Sanchez phones him up. He confronts Richard. This poor guy, he was completely seduced by this family. Of course, Richard denies. And then suddenly on the call, you hear Mayumi interrupt and she confesses to writing the journal. Richard just blows up on that call. You can hear him just screaming at Mayumi, saying, oh my God, fuck, what the fuck? Every time you write something down, you cause a fucking shitstorm.
I think you caused the shitstorm.
Yeah, exactly. So there you have it. It was an intended hoax that just ended up with genuine fear that Falcon was actually in that balloon. And like I said, I know they were guilty, Adam, but I don't think the way that the police handled this was justified. I think that there was a degree of a witch hunt here. The police buckled under pressure. They struck it lucky, but their intention was to find them guilty.
Or was that diary also planted? Because they knew that they couldn't probably pull the wool over people's eyes. If they admitted that, okay, we were going to do a hoax, but then we had genuine worry because the hoax didn't happen how we thought it was going to happen. So actually, those kind of feelings and the way we portrayed ourselves at the time, they were genuine. And now actually, we can't backtrack on it. So that's kind of what they did.
Wow. Hot take from Adam Cox. I don't know. Could be.
I don't know. They're still wrong. They're still wrong-uns.
I don't know. The way that the police dealt with this sets a terrible precedent. And it's because of this immense influence that the media have in dismantling people's ability to just apply critical thought. Everything was fueled by tenuous, weak, circumstantial evidence. I read in 2011 that the Heenes, they did try to auction off the balloon to raise money for the tsunami relief effort in Japan. Their asking price was $1 million. In the end, they got $2,500.
Oh.
That's a bit shit. Yeah. And it was for a good cause, but I don't know whether or not they gave that $2,500 to the relief. Who knows? But yeah, finally though, in 2020, the governor of Colorado, they give Richard and Mayumi a full pardon, saying that they'd already paid the price in the public's eyes. He commends their efforts in becoming better citizens and acknowledges how Richard was running a small business now, trying to educate people about the weather, and that now it was time for everyone to just move on.
I mean, yeah, fair enough. Let's not hold any massive hate towards them. It's funny, really.
It's really funny, and I love Richard. Yes, I know that there's some kind of aspersions being cast about his shady past, but I would be very lucky if I had a dad like that growing up. Running into the eye of a storm. You know what I mean?
You might not have grown up.
You're having an itch like a son of a twitch. Getting my siblings to scratch it. I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's true. I might not have grown up, but I would have been happy. I wouldn't have had to shit in my back garden.
Yeah, okay, fair point.
So, Adam, that is the story of the Balloon Boy Hoax.
That was, that's a lot more to it than I thought there was going to be with that story.
As always.
As always. But yeah, interesting. And so, are the families, the couple, they're still together?
I think so, yeah.
Still got the rock band? Or they put that?
Oh, I don't know now. I don't know. It hasn't broken out into mainstream, so
no?
they're probably given up on that. Who knows what the next hoax will be, right?
Fair enough.
But yeah, shall we run the outro for this week?
Let's do it.
And that brings us to the end of another fascinating foray into the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things. We really hope you enjoyed the ride as much as we did.
And if today's episode sparked your curiosity, then do us a favor and follow us on your favorite podcast app. It truly makes a world of difference and helps more people just like you discover the show.
And for our dedicated freaks out there, don't forget that next week's episode is already waiting for you on our Patreon. And as always, it's completely free to access.
And if you want even more, then join our Certified Freaks tier to unlock the entire archive, delve into exclusive content, and get a sneak peek at what's coming next. We'd love for you to join our growing community.
We drop new episodes every Tuesday. And until then, remember, not every story that takes off is grounded in truth. We'll see you next time.
See ya.